Joining us now is Ryan Verret, who is the Director of Medical Ethics for the Louisiana Right to Life Federation, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Maybe if we could just start off by telling us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into a little bit about the question 2 here in Massachusetts.
Sure. I'm involved in, with, of course, Louisiana Right to Life. We have a medical ethics center, and what I do primarily is work is sort of in an advocacy role. 5 major areas we look at a lot. I spend a lot of time talking with families, with physicians, medical school students, being proactive against assisted suicide and euthanasia, of course, the unethical withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment, nutrition and hydration, medical discrimination against sort of people with disabilities, in particular individuals maybe with Down syndrome and other types of disabilities as well. Sort of work to help people protect their own lives and their will through legal documents, wills to live, encouraging them to choose people to have sort of durable medical power of attorney with someone that they trust. And finally, we spend a lot of time sort of helping to clarify and help people to understand what we believe should be sort of at the heart of true medical and healthcare reform. So those 5 components are areas where we spend a lot of time on.
And that's basically, too, what we're talking about, educating. And you're here, we have a big question here in Massachusetts, question 2 on physician-assisted suicide. And talk to us, too, about how you ended up coming here and your work in helping us to defeat this question.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, of course. But in the beginning of June, I was at a conference in St. Paul, and there were a whole group of people from the U.S. and Canada speaking about this topic in particular, assisted suicide, and of course the reality of euthanasia in some places in Europe and possibly Australia. And what came from that sort of meeting was just some momentum. What can we do to be proactive here in Massachusetts? Just realizing the heart of the issue of something developing in Massachusetts and how that could really affect other places in the country. We know that, I know that for sure. Even in Louisiana, we've been proactive and we've taken measures to criminalize assisted suicide and euthanasia. But we know that if Massachusetts would sort of vote along this line, that it would have sort of a domino effect to other states. I think that would just be a reality, of course. So I was able to connect with other people involved in Right to Life and Catholic organizations, and we decided to come and spend some time here providing some resources and some manpower to just help in any way to get people to understand what's at the heart of this question.
And I think, too, just people hearing, we talked about this before, too, but the death with dignity, I believe they call it. But maybe if we can get into some of the specifics about this. And I know you've worked in hospice care and
Sure.
palliative care, and maybe talk about that. And, I know a lot of people think, oh, let's give the person some compassion as they die and give them. But what are some of the things that are specifically wrong with this question?
Well, I mean, there's so many areas to look at this, and one of the things that's always challenging, I think, from a Catholic perspective, but also from just a kind of a pro-life, right to life perspective, is finding what is really at the heart of this issue. I mean, there's a sort of a misunderstanding, I think, that it's trying to be resolved with this question of addressing what are the true needs of the dying and the suffering. At the heart of this is sort of a decision that someone's making to go about successfully with suicide. And that's always been something in the past that we've always tried to intervene and to provide resources for someone to not choose suicide. So now we're setting up sort of a parallel system where it's going to be an option for some, but actually should be discouraged by others. And this is one particular area, and so there's a tension. But what happens is, I think, when we get to a certain decision in society where we cross a threshold and we say that some people, because they've reached a certain disability, a certain lack of functioning, a lack of mental ability, that their lives really shouldn't really be lived, maybe even another minute, and there should be sort of a quality judgment. I guess the area of allowing an individual to choose that can be talked about, but when we have sort of a culture, society saying we want to respect that decision, but then that decision just spreads. And I know people don't like the speculative kind of argument here, and just nationally. However, that's an area that we have to look at. And from a faith perspective, we're opening the door to really a disregard for what is true freedom. One of the essential areas in the dying process that people usually go through oftentimes is depression. And what we're saying here is, well, let's stop the depression and let's do something to really just end life there, you know.
Yeah.
From a Catholic perspective, you know, we always had the example of Christ. Even, you know, he went through his agony, but then he went through a certain level of acceptance, and then there was, of course, there was great merit to his suffering and death. And so from a Catholic perspective, we can always identify with that and choose that. But from a secular point of view, I think what always helps the argument is, do we want sort of to set up a situation where we have physicians assisting us, or we have family members assisting with us to sort of end our life and making a decision about that? It's not a good direction for us to go in, of course.
And it encompasses so much too, in terms of not just the individual who's choosing this, but other people around them, and just society in general, to accept physician-assisted suicide.
Exactly. Yeah.
And maybe just one last one, we're running out of time, but maybe if you could talk about that too. I know a lot of people have said, you know, the Catholic Church is trying to keep people alive as long as they can, but there is that measure of, and having some experience with hospice care and palliative care. Could you talk about that briefly, just you know, how, you know, there are pain medications, there are pain management that can be helpful for people.
Of course, we've come so far in the discussion. One of the problems is if we approach assisted suicide and we choose assisted suicide, there's the fact, and it shows that in other places in the world, that palliative care is, the interest is not promoting palliative care. But palliative care has always been a part, of course, the Catholic worldview and the hospice care and those types of things. And providing the amount of sort of care to alleviate the suffering so that they can prepare for some of the most kind of heroic moments of their life. Needs to be safeguarded, and we can do that adequately. It's been done and admirably by so many religious, so many Christian and Catholic institutions around the country, and we have to keep promoting that. We have to strive for that and speak for them. But I know for a fact, if we say that as an option, we're going to really not allow those resources sort of go in the direction that we really need for them to go in.
Yeah.
We're going to understand that's speculative, but I think we could point out that would happen.
We think we could talk a lot more.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ryan, for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we're going to send it back to the rest of This Is the Day.